Hi, and welcome to the Sage Sorority. This is the Sage Sorority Podcast with your host, me, Chantal Russo, where the only dues are your ears, not your dignity. In our sanctuary over here, we trade archaic rules for real world insights, swapping gossip for growth and hazing for healing. This is a secret society, ladies. All we ask is trust. So let's go. Welcome back, guys. Happy Thursday. How are we all doing? So let's get into it. Episode 3, First Love Forever Standards. This one is something I've been mulling over for a while, and I'm so happy to dive into it with you guys today. Let's call it the relationship blueprint theory. The idea is that your first few dating experiences as a young woman fundamentally shape your expectations and patterns in relationships for years to come. Obviously, there's a caveat. Nothing changes until you change. But if you are operating on autopilot, this is kind of what I believe. I feel like there's a lot of discussion when it comes to our family dynamic, right? And how we grow up in our family teaches us what to do, what not to do, what love looks like, what it doesn't look like. And there's a lot of chatter about that, and rightfully so, because our family, specifically our parents, are our first examples of adults and often our first examples of love. But basically, my theory is that as a young woman, I'll speak to this as a personal experience and one that I've seen echoed throughout most women I know, is that your early relationships, whether it's preteen, teenagers, or early college years, basically your first few loves, your first few real examples of boyfriend and girlfriend, drastically shape you and unfortunately can really shape you for the negative and create really negative habits if you don't curb it and are radically honest with yourself. And I really want to drive this point home because I think a lot of people just assume that purely by getting older, as in your age is increasing year by year, God willing, that automatically means you are wiser, you're smarter, and you wouldn't make the same mistakes that you would 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And obviously, part of that is true, right? Like age brings wisdom, and you've ideally seen more things, you've experienced more things, and you just have a more macro view of life. The problem is that just doesn't also equate into making better decisions. We know this, right? If I said that to someone, if I said that to you, you would say, of course it doesn't. But yet we have these little tells in our life where we are making poor decisions purely based on subconscious habit. I've seen women come from beautiful family structures and still make poor decisions when it comes to men in the dating world. I've seen girls vow that they will never turn into their mothers, and bit by bit, year by year, I see them morphing into that exact same person. It is so important for us to be radically honest with ourselves and do the inner work. It truly prevents us from making unconscious poor decisions. There's a lot of talk about generational wealth and trauma and living out my ancestors' wildest dreams, but a lot of that is the unsexy work. And a lot of that is discipline and being super honest with yourself. You're good, you're bad, you're ugly, which I talk about a lot because we all have it. And figuring out what kind of environment you came from and being really honest and seeing how that shows up in your life. Obviously, this is the sort of conversation that could go in a million different directions. But for today, we're just going to talk about how your first few relationships can really, really shape you without even realizing it. I'll start with myself. So I was a late bloomer. I guess this is relative to, people around you. But in my opinion, I was a late bloomer. No regrets whatsoever. I think most women would probably say that. I truly believe all things in divine timing. And in my early dating years, like late teens, early 20s, I was fortunate enough to date two genuine young men. Now, the relationships weren't perfect, and they were not perfect, neither was I. But there were key moments where, now that I look back, it really shaped me for what kind of behavior I should expect, but also what kind of behavior I should put out for the most loving, healthy relationship that I could possibly have, even at that age. Although the relationships weren't perfect and they both ended at their appropriate times, it definitely helped me to develop what I would call like relationship radar. When I later encountered men exhibiting poor behavior, not only did it just feel very wrong, it was just extremely unattractive. Like I just wasn't used to being treated poorly, so it wasn't something that I could really get on board with. And this is why I don't agree with the idea that everyone goes through it because you're young. I also don't think that's fair. I think it excuses poor behavior and really sets up traumatic experiences, especially for young women. And that's what I'll talk about because that's what I know. Now, Now, yes, does everyone come into their maturity at different times, different stages, different ages, different places? Absolutely. But I do really think that there's something to unpack as to why these early experiences are so powerful and how they can either set us up for success and create patterns that we want to use in the future or patterns that we actively need to work to break. And I can promise you, this is not something that I'm just making up. There's tons of research behind it. There was a study in 2019 published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology that found that people tend to recreate the same dynamics across all relationships. The researchers tracked young women specifically over 7 years. Now, 7 years is a good chunk. It's not everything, but it's a good chunk of a decade, right? If you think of how you dated when you were 20 to 27, how did you date when you were 30 to 37? How do you date between 40 and 47? That's a decent amount of time. And you would hope that there's constant evolution, constant bettering, et cetera, et cetera. The research shows that that's actually not the case. Even when the women insisted they were choosing differently, they still weren't. There was remarkable consistency in the personality traits of their partners. I'm going to emphasize that. Dr. Lisa Firestone is a clinical psychologist and relationship expert, and she calls this repetition compulsion, our unconscious tendencies to recreate familiar relationship dynamics even when they're painful. That is what I want to emphasize here, because this happens a lot. Even when it's painful, there's something about our brains and the way we are wired for comfort and something that we recognize and repetition that we will go back to something even when it's painful. Think about it. How many times have you ever found yourself saying or heard someone say, why do I always end up with this kind of person? Maybe this kind of person is just attracted to me. Maybe I give off those vibes. Maybe I'm cursed. Even if you attract a certain type of person, how good are you at creating boundaries with that kind of person? How good are you at recognizing the BS and immediately putting them wherever they need to be, immediately putting them in a different category? How good are you at that? And I find that that's where the gap is a lot of the time. And I think what makes these early relationships so important and so crucial is that it's really like your first go around, right? Because before that, your experience with relationships was always being the third person. So either watching it on TV, media, books, your parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, maybe older cousins, so on and so forth. So this is your first time really getting into it yourself. And those experiences can be incredibly enlightening, but they're also so impactful. You feel everything to the 10th degree, right? Because now everything that you've idealized, everything that you've seen, everything that you've learned, you are essentially putting it into practice, or you think you are, and everything just feels so intense, especially at that age when, frontal lobe's still not there, and being in a relationship is also of the highest merit, especially when you're young. It's kind of like a social marker. Everything just feels so intense. One thing I often say to my friends that are parents is be gentle with your children, because kids' worlds are so much smaller than ours. As an adult, you have a million things going on at any given time, but kids often don't. If you think of their day or their life as a pie chart, they would have much larger chunks than an adult would. So because they have such larger chunks, everything, good or bad, is felt so much more intensely. So anyways, tying into attachment theory and all that kind of stuff, our early romantic relationships, along with relationships with our parents and family, we can never forget that, hold a lot of deep beliefs about our worthiness of love and where we fall on that range, if others can be trusted to meet our needs, what love is supposed to feel like, what love is supposed to look like. This is a big one, especially if you watched your parents having a very healthy, loving, humor-filled, joyous relationship, or you witnessed abuse. There's a lot of range to that. If your first boyfriend was emotionally unavailable, you might internalize that love equals yearning. And I think this is a very, very, very big thing. I honestly think I could probably do a TED Talk on this. There's a lot of yearning equals love equals yearning. And this is something that I even see in adults, both men and women, that you need to work hard to prove your worth and that emotional distance is normal. Now, obviously, there's a lot more you can say to that, and there's a lot more context that you can give. It's something you see on social media a lot. It's also something you see in young love through the media and in teenagers a lot, right? They romanticize everything. There's always a little bit of angst, and there's always some sort of arc and some sort of major moment. Everything has to be like a fairy tale, like a movie. It's really important, I think, as adults, even raising younger children, younger teenagers, to remind them that real life often looks very different different from art, and it's important to be able to separate the two. Here's like a hypothetical situation, right? So, okay, you have this young woman and her first serious boyfriend is very jealous, right? He checks her phone. He doesn't like her hanging out with guy friends. He makes her feel guilty for spending time with anybody else. And she's thinking that, one, well, he obviously really cares about me. He's looking out for me. He just wants to spend as much time with me. He's very invested in this relationship. He must really love me if he's this worried about losing me. Another thing is like intensity equals passion. Again, this is something I've definitely seen in women as we get older, that like there's no spark, there's no intensity, there's no angst, there's no push pull. And again, that doesn't equal love. I hate to reuse the word like trauma response, but often it is, because we know in theory, and we know with our rational side of the brain, that love should feel safe, it should feel secure, it should feel inviting, it should feel warm, etc., etc. So we go back to this hypothetical scenario. You fast forward like maybe 10 years, she's had a couple relationships after that, and she realizes that she has unconsciously sought out partners who display all that same possessiveness, right? Even worse, she now has developed behaviors to accommodate the jealousy. So it's not just what's happening to you, it's also your response to it. What kind of person are you becoming because of these negative relationships? How is it morphing you? Every single relationship you have, familial, friends, work, intimate, they all shape us, right? I'm a big believer that there's no better test in life and there's no better pool to grow in than our relationships. You can read all the books, you can listen to all the podcasts, LOL. You could read all the articles, whatever it is. There's nothing that really tests you and really puts all that knowledge into action like being in relationship, like being in community with people. It doesn't only have to be an intimate relationship. Just being in community with someone, another human on this earth who's just as messed up as you are and has just as much baggage as you do, that puts all your therapy to practice. I really, really believe that. So now she's over explaining where she's been. She's limiting her friendships. She's constantly reassuring her partner, even though a partner like that, there's no amount of reassurance you can do to make them happy, right? The problem isn't just that she keeps choosing quote unquote jealous men, or that even worse, jealous men are just attracted to her. It's that she has internalized a role in response to that jealousy. So not only is she essentially honey to those bees, she's now morphed herself into being the best honey for those bees. Terrible like example, but I know you get me. Another really good study, this one is pretty recent, from 2020 from University of Alberta, shout out to Canadians, found that women who experience controlling behavior in their first serious relationships were more likely to normalize similar behaviors in future relationships. The researchers called this relationship conditioning. So it brings us to a really important point, that patterns don't just happen in obvious cases. I feel like it's like it has to be really obvious, glaring toxicity or glaring abuse, and it's often not that way at all. And I think that that kind of harsh black and white reasoning makes a lot of people fall through the cracks, and unfortunately means a lot of people don't get the help and don't do the course correction that they need. Things can be extremely subtle. Maybe your first boyfriend was very conflict avoidant, so you learn to bottle up your needs. Maybe your early relationships criticized your appearance, so you've developed an unconscious belief that you need to be perfect. Maybe you have an issue with food, the way you look, colors, how things look on you. All of these things can create a pattern, especially when you're putting so much stock in a person, which typically in your early relationships, that person is, again, a big part of your life. They're a big part of your world. Maybe you dated someone who you put on a pedestal, and now you think that regular relationships or healthy relationships feel boring. They feel mundane. Or maybe you dated someone where there was a lot of push and pull, a lot of hot and cold, a lot of passion, a lot of angst. And then when you meet someone and things seem to be more of like a flat line, you just feel like, he can't be my person. This is so boring. You know, I've said before, and I don't think it's original, but there is nothing like being in a healthy and stable relationship to really challenge you, because a lot of us haven't had that. And even if you did have that, you might feel like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. It might feel weird. It might be uncomfortable. Okay, Chantal, I get it. How do I know that the relationship that I'm in now is healthy and stable and operating at its highest level? Or am I just recreating the shit show that I've had in the past? It's like, fabulous question. Thank you for asking. So, like everything in life, we need to work backwards. So, what did you learn in your family structure? What did you learn in your household? Work through everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. I will say that a million times on this podcast. What did you learn about love from your parents? What did you learn verbally? And then what did you learn from them by watching them? This is a really huge point because often your parents are human and they're making mistakes every day. What you are being told isn't always what you're being shown. And it's really important to notice the delta between that. I feel like that's a huge kind of light bulb moment when it comes to what you learned in your actual home in your early days. What feels familiar in your relationships? So regardless of who you've been with in the past, what has always been a consistent feature? You can write good qualities that you share with this person or that the person has always had, or things that have always kind of popped up in your relationship that have felt good. You can also talk about things that have felt not so good that you have seen. Have you always kind of dated a man that's slightly avoidant? Have you always kind of dated a man that was really funny? Have you always kind of dated a man who was a great dresser? Have you always dated a man that was in higher education? Like, get nitty gritty with it. You will begin to see your own patterns. It's almost like you're doing detective work for your own life, if that makes sense. I would also do an audit of the relationships that you've had in your entire life. You don't have to go through every single relationship, but you will know the ones that were either the longest or had the most impact on you. And I really want you to focus on your early stages and work through. Start there because the beginning tells us everything we need to know. I'm going to butcher the quote, but if you know your history, you know everything. So you want to take audit of your relationships, things that you notice in the relationship. How did you feel overall in that relationship? How did you guys split? And traits and qualities that you notice about each person. The very first step in changing your relationship pattern isn't to just find a new person, it's to become a different person. Also, we need to challenge our definition of normal. Research from the Gottman Institute, if you don't know the Gottman Institute or you don't know the Gottmans, they are, top tier in relationship, sex, and marriage psychology. They are amazing. I highly recommend looking into their work. Research from their institute shows that a lot of women normalize problematic behaviors because they've never experienced the alternative. And I do think that this is very true. So, do you seek drama because you associate it with passion? We talked about this earlier in the podcast. Do you tolerate neglect because you've never known consistent attention? Do you avoid vulnerability because you've learned early on that it leads to rejection? These are all really good questions to ask yourself. Of course, if you're in therapy, feel free to talk about this with your therapist. I think it can be really helpful to do this work with a qualified professional to really get your mind rolling and kind of get you to start thinking about these things in a detailed way. And I think that this is important work, whether you're single all the way through to being married. We are our best works of art and we are always a work in progress. Also, I'm going to use the B word, boundaries. What's going on with your boundaries, babe? Like, where are they at? How strong are they? Are they a little loosey-goosey when it comes to your man, or do you keep that shit tight? Setting clear boundaries isn't mean. It can get a bad rap, but it's easier said than done, right? It can be very difficult to do, especially if you've never really operated like that in your life, and different levels for different folks, right? Maybe you find it super easy to set boundaries with your parents, but you struggle with your friends. Maybe it's easy at work, but you struggle in your relationship. Especially if you identify as a people pleaser, that can be a really huge thing for you. And my advice to that would be to start small. Start being vocal about even something small that doesn't work for you. Like, no, I don't want the Coke. When the restaurant brings you the Coke by mistake, you want the Coke Zero. Could you please send it back? Chips make chunks, right? And it can, one, give you a little boost and make you feel confident in exercising your right and your voice. And it can allow you to make bigger impacts in the future. Every time you honor a boundary, you are shaping your relationship. This is really important because we are all learning, evolving, and growing together, including in your relationship. You are always shape-shifting your relationship. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is shaped in cement. You can always ebb and flow as you need to. And lastly, before I go through some serious takeaways, I want to talk about not dating your type. This could be a little controversial depending on how you look at it. that I could probably expand on in another podcast. But how does that sound for my girlies that are single? You're on apps, you're out in the bars, you're out at the lounges. How does that feel? Do you instantly kind of tense up, or do you roll your eyes, or are you a little bit more optimistic with that idea? This can be, and I would only suggest this after you've kind of done a little bit more of a deep dive, done a little bit more of an audit on your relationships and kind of where you're at and what you can improve on. Now, boundaries are important. Preferences are also important, and only you know what will make you truly happy, but it is something to consider. Have you always really gone for that elusive, creative type that you have the best date with, you spend the whole weekend together, and then you don't hear from him for like 10 days? Could we maybe tighten that up a little bit? Could we maybe swap that for someone who works a 9 to 5 and maybe isn't going to bring you to the latest dive bar at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday, but he's going to bring you to a beautiful restaurant at 7 p.m. on a Thursday night, and you're going to have a great time, and he's going to text you to make sure that you got home okay, and you're going to hear from him in a reasonable amount of time, ideally 24 to 48 hours after the date. Just saying. Can we maybe switch it up? The year is still new. You are still fresh. Just try it. For every hot, sexy, elusive player that maybe you can throw in a different type of aura. Just something to think about. And for my girlies in relationships, think about where and when you feel most triggered and where you react most in your relationship. So, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Dr. Alexandra Solomon. She is a fantastic psychologist, and there is a book that she wrote, and I think it's Calling the One In, something like that. Don't quote me. I'll put it in the show notes. I read it years ago on Audible, and I'm actually going to reread it because it is a really good book, and it's like a list book. It's like 20 things to da-da-da-da-da. So if you're that kind of person, I think you'll really enjoy it. But she has another book called Taking Sexy Back, and she says our emotional reactions in relationships often have less to do with the present moment and more to do with old wounds being activated. So when you feel disproportionately upset, ask yourself, what old story is being triggered here? What am I actually reacting to? Your strongest emotional reactions are often where your oldest relationship wounds live. So keep track of that. The most important part of the work is the why. Why does this bother me so much? Like him putting his wet towel on the bed has sent you into a rage. And it's like, why? Is it because now the bed is wet? Maybe. Or is it because you feel like your partner does not value the little things and you value the little things? Is it because you feel like your partner doesn't take what you have to say seriously? Is it because you put a deep investment into the home and you feel like, 1, it's not reciprocated, 2, it's not respected? This is the why. Again, great work you can do in therapy. We've all been there, but just something to think about on your own. And for all of us, consciously create new experiences. And we know about neuroplasticity research, and it tells us to create new pathways through repeated experiences, right? Thoughts become things. I said it before. So if you want to be better, you have to do better. And there's no way around that. How can you create new experiences either in your relationships, dating, so on and so forth? Gradually, you will rewrite, say that 5 times fast. You will rewrite the belief and you will rewire your brain. And that's what we want. We want to know the why, we want to heal, and we want to do better in the future. Okay, so here are a few ways to reset your relationship mindset if you feel like maybe your early experiences set the wrong tone, or if you feel like, I've kind of been on cruise control for many years and I really just want to take stock of where I've been, where I'm at, and where I'm going. So 1, you want to check your pattern. Obviously, we talked about going back into your history from beginning to now. Think about the dynamics that you keep falling into. Maybe you're always the one apologizing. Do you tolerate emotional distance and the silent treatment? Do you give the silent treatment? The relationship red flags that you ignore today are the relationship patterns you'll be dealing with tomorrow. So write it all down. Sometimes just seeing things on paper in front of you helps to get all your feelings out. 2, you want to get very clear on your standards. So this is where the vagueness has to go out the window. It can't just be, I want my partner to respect me. What does respect actually look like to you? How do you want to handle arguments? Instead of just saying, I want a supportive partner, explain it. What does support mean when you're having a bad day? What does support mean when you're on your period? What does support mean if you lose your job? Things like that. This is really important because it's not about being rigid. It's about having a proper foundation for what it is that you want moving forward. Chips make chunks. You want to set tiny boundaries first. You start small. If you always respond to texts immediately because you're coming from a place of panic, maybe wait until you have more time. If you feel guilty saying no, practice with easy situations like the example I referenced in the restaurant. Boundaries are truly like a muscle. The more you use them, guys, the stronger they get, the more comfortable you get. Rinse, repeat. Then you want to flip the script. If you're having a hard time implementing things into your own life, try flipping the script. Would you accept this treatment for your best friend, your sister? If you wouldn't want someone else to experience this kind of love, then why are you accepting it? How would you feel if your best friend really struggled with people pleasing in her relationship or was with someone that wasn't great to her? What would you say to her if you felt like she was the one acting really poorly? Flipping the script can really help shift your whole perspective. Finally, can you find new relationship role models? This one might be a little bit more tough, and I really want to emphasize a point here that I'm talking about real couples, like not Instagram or TikTok accounts. I really want to be clear with that. Unless they are truly relationship role models that show the good, the bad, and the ugly and are giving like really wholehearted advice. Obviously, you can't contextualize everything, but you can learn both good and bad online. So I just want to emphasize that. Like, ideally, I'm talking about real couples that you can talk to one-on-one who have the kind of connection that you want. So you want to pay attention to things like, how do they handle disagreements? How do they show up for each other? How do they communicate? See if you can create your own new baseline based on new information that you're getting. We often call like having a type is just preference and boundaries, but a lot of times it's just repeating the patterns that you haven't yet recognized. Your past relationships don't have to dictate your future ones. You get to choose what comes next, provided you have the self-worth, the self-assuredness, the confidence to reject anything that doesn't fit. Our love histories is one of the strongest predictors of future relationship success. It's not about blaming past partners or even like your younger self. It's not about blame at all. This is about radical acceptance and honesty, compassionate, especially for your younger self, understanding how you learn to love and be loved, and making changes for your future self. Your early dating experiences were not just random events. They were truly formative chapters in your entire relationship story. I want to emphasize that. Your entire relationship story. It doesn't start today. It doesn't end today. We are always growing. We are always adding pen to paper. By understanding how that has shaped you, you're able to gain power to choose which lessons you want to keep and what you want to leave behind. Don't forget that recognizing is the first step towards a true transformation. By bringing these unconscious patterns forward, you're able to dismantle their power over you, make better choices in the future, and be a better you ultimately. So definitely share this episode with a friend that you think could benefit. And it's a really good discussion point, right? It was a little bit more heavier this week, but I think it will be helpful regardless. Okay, so this week's Sanctuary Selects is a bit random, and it's basically 2 Instagram cooking accounts that I love. So I go through a very weird relationship with cooking. I do enjoy cooking to an extent. So I have recipe books. Like, I actually like to buy recipe books. I bookmark them, I save them. I love finding recipes online. And I'm not one of those people that just saves a recipe and I'm never going to make it. I will actually save the recipe, jot down all the ingredients that I need in my notes app, and then go to the grocery store and literally like buy everything and make it. My issue with cooking is that the cleanup is an absolute nightmare. And I know that people say you can clean as you go, and I still do, but you still have a bunch of dishes. You still have a full dishwasher. Like, it's just kind of a nuisance, honestly. I know this sounds like first world problems, but that's my beef with cooking. And I know that I'm not alone in this. I literally hate the cleanup. It's the worst part of cooking. And then also, I feel like in lockdown, I just got so sick of cooking. Like, at one point, I was like, I don't want to eat anything that I've made. I got so sick of my own cooking, guys. And I honestly feel like it scarred me, like deep, deep, deep trauma. Cooking during lockdown was a nightmare. So I just go through phases where I'll want to cook and I just want to eat food that I made. And then I'll be like, I don't want to do this. So it's not really consistent, which I know is just not ideal. And I know that everyone that has a family is probably like, girl, like, enjoy these days because when you have a family, you literally have to cook, which that'll like keep me up at night. Like the idea of someone coming to me and like needing food like stresses me out so hardcore. Like I just had a protein bar for dinner. Like I just actually can't. But anyways, I'm rambling. So there's two accounts. One is Shred Happens. It's this guy and he's been cooking on Instagram for a really long time. He's very like low carb, high protein. So if that is your jam, you will love his recipes. And what I like is that I find that his recipes, his salads, his lunches are just really interesting. They're tasty, they're flavorful, savory. He does a really good job of mixing more like Mediterranean ingredients, which I don't really feel like a lot of American chefs do. And I don't think he's a formal chef, but he does have like a cookbook and stuff. And his recipes are also easy to replicate. They're not super complicated. And he makes eating low carb still very interesting. And then the other account that I love is M the Nutritionist. She's based in London. She's quite popular. She has a cookbook as well. And what I like about her is she has a very healthy relationship to food, in my opinion, from what I see online. I'm not really into like fitness gurus or anything like that because I feel like it can just either be super bland or super toxic. And I feel like she's neither of that. She enjoys food. She cooks flavorful food. I find that healthy food can be very boring and very bland, and her food is not like that at all. She'll use beans, nduja. She just makes interesting food that is also healthy. She typically notes how many calories are in a dish, which I find very helpful. And she'll also go out on the weekend and drink wine and have roast at some of her favorite pubs. She'll also go to restaurants with her husband. I just feel like she has a really good 360 opinion and perspective on food, which I really appreciate. I'm someone that loves food, and food is definitely a part of my lifestyle and my culture. I enjoy good food. I love going out to eat. Like food is love. Food is community for me. I love good wine, et cetera, et cetera. So I like following people that operate with that same mindset. So if you think that way too and you like to cook, you will enjoy both of those accounts. I will note them both in the show notes. All right, guys, that's the end of the episode. Don't forget to share this episode with someone that you think could very much so benefit from my little relationship theory, how early relationships really shape a woman's dating life. We are making better habits and better choices in 2025 and beyond. So get on board and share this with a friend. Don't forget to rate the podcast, especially my Apple and Spotify girlies or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Chantal Russo. This is the Sage Sorority. Love you lots, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.